I always thought my neighborhood was safe. The streets were lined with old oak trees. There were families walking their dogs even at night, and the corner store guy knew everyone by name. That was the picture I carried in my head whenever I walked home after late shifts. It made me feel like nothing could really go wrong here. I told myself I was careful, that I stuck to lit paths and kept my phone charged. But the truth is I had started to believe bad things only happened somewhere else, to someone else. That night, I left work a little later than usual. My manager had asked me to help close up, and by the time I stepped outside, it was close to midnight. The streets were quiet, not empty but quiet in that way where sound carries differently. Every footstep echoed just a bit louder, every rustle of leaves felt sharper. I adjusted my bag across my shoulder and began the familiar 20-minute walk. At first, it was the same as always. The bakery lights on the corner were still glowing faintly, and the faint smell of bread drifted out into the street. A cat darted across my path, making me jump for half a second before I laughed it off. I put one earbud in, leaving the other out, because that tiny rule of mine made me feel prepared. It was silly, maybe, but it gave me comfort. I turned down the long stretch that led past the park. That part of the walk was always the darkest, even with the street lamps. The park on my left was full of shadows, and the houses on my right were spaced apart, their porches dim. It was the part of the walk where I usually sped up, but I'd done it so many times that night didn't feel any different. Until I noticed a car. It wasn't unusual to see a car drive by. But this one didn't keep going. It was a plain white sedan, nothing fancy, nothing noticeable, except it slowed down as it passed me. I kept my eyes straight ahead, pretending not to notice, but in the corner of my vision I saw it crawl forward then turn onto the next street. I told myself maybe they lived there. When I reached the intersection, I saw the same car waiting at the stop sign. Its headlights washed over me, and I felt the prickling sense that I was being studied. Still, I walked past, heart ticking a little faster, and tried to reason it out. People take wrong turns all the time. Maybe he was lost. But then I heard the low roll of tires again. I didn't look right away. I forced myself to wait to listen. The sound was steady, creeping along at the pace of my steps. My throat went dry. When I finally glanced back, the white sedan was behind me, maybe 20 yards away, moving so slowly it barely looked like it was moving at all. My hand went straight to my phone. I didn't call anyone, not yet, because part of me was still clinging to the hope that this was nothing. Instead, I quickened my pace, testing the car without making it too obvious. Sure enough, it matched me. That was the first real moment of panic. Every street suddenly felt longer than I remembered. Every porch light seemed too dim, and the nearest convenience store was still a good 10 minutes away. My head raced through what I should do: knock on someone's door, pretend I was meeting someone, turn down a side street. But the fear of making the wrong choice kept my legs moving forward in the only direction I knew. Then, as if to confirm every terrible thought running through me, the car's headlights dimmed. It slowed even more until it was barely creeping behind me. A window rolled down. "Hey," a man's voice called softly. "Do you live around here?" I froze for half a second, not sure if answering was safer than silence. My instinct screamed to keep walking, so I did, but I also tilted my head just slightly, enough to signal I heard him. "I'm new to the area," he went on, his voice calm, almost friendly. "Can you help me find a street?" It sounded harmless enough. It always does at first. I didn't answer. I just walked faster, gripping my bag until my knuckles hurt, waiting for what he'd do next. And that's when the car door clicked open. The sound of the door shutting behind him cracked through the night louder than anything I'd ever heard. I didn't dare look right away, but I could sense him stepping onto the pavement. His footsteps were heavy, steady, closing the distance between us. My heart thudded so hard it felt like it was echoing out into the quiet street. I forced myself to turn my head just slightly, and there he was. A man in his 30s maybe, wearing a plain hoodie and jeans, nothing that would stand out in a crowd. But the way he moved, slow and deliberate, made every hair on my body stand on end. "Hey, wait," he said, holding something in his hand that caught the glow of a street lamp. It looked like a folded map. A map, in this day and age? It felt wrong, staged, like he'd picked it on purpose. I shook my head quickly. "Sorry, I don't know," I muttered, my voice thin and tight. My pace picked up again, but he didn't stop. His steps quickened to match mine. "You sure? It's just around here somewhere. Could you just point me in the right direction?" His tone was even, too even, as if he was rehearsing. I knew then he wasn't lost. No one asked for directions like that at midnight, to a random woman walking alone. My chest tightened, and I reached for my phone, this time actually dialing. I pressed my thumb against the emergency number, ready to call, when I heard a sound that chilled me more than his footsteps. A car door sliding open. It wasn't the sedan. It was the side of a van parked across the street, one I hadn't even noticed until that moment. Out of the shadows, another figure stepped out fast, taller, broader, his face obscured by the dark. I bolted. The world narrowed into nothing but the pounding of my shoes against the pavement, and the rasp of my breath in my ears. I sprinted down the sidewalk, aiming for the row of houses just ahead, praying one of them had someone awake inside. Behind me, I could hear them shouting, their steps crashing after mine. "Get her!" one of them barked. I veered toward the nearest yard and grabbed onto the iron railing of the porch. My body slammed against it, and I clung to it with everything I had. Hands tore at my waist, trying to wrench me backward, but I wrapped my arms tighter, my nails scraping against cold metal. "Let go!" the voice growled in my ear. His breath was hot, sour, frantic. He yanked at my wrists, trying to peel me off the railing. When that didn't work, he tried dragging me by my legs, but I hooked them around the bars, screaming so loud my throat burned. The neighborhood had always felt quiet, too quiet, but in that moment I begged for someone, anyone, to hear me. The man cursed and struck out, his fists smashing into the side of my face. Stars burst in my vision, but I refused to let go. My body was pure instinct. Fight, claw, survive. I bit down on his hand when he tried to cover my mouth. He yelped, jerking back in pain, and for a split second his grip loosened. I pulled myself tighter against the railing, tears mixing with blood at the corner of my lip. "Help!" I screamed again, louder than I thought I could. The taller man was crossing the street now, his shadow stretching toward me, his pace quick but controlled. He thought I was already theirs. My heart slammed so hard I thought it might tear out of my chest. And then, another voice. "Hey! Get away from her!" It came from across the street. A figure was sprinting toward us, barefoot, wearing nothing but a bathrobe flapping open around him. In his hands was a long wooden stick. No, not just a stick, a hockey stick, raised high like he meant every word he shouted. For a split second, the men froze. The one gripping me looked back, panic flashing in his movements. The taller man cursed under his breath, then pivoted. "Let's go!" Just like that, the grip on me vanished. I stumbled to my knees, clutching the railing as they bolted back toward the van. The door slammed shut, and with a screech of tires the vehicle shot down the street, headlights cutting past us in a blur. I collapsed onto the porch steps, shaking uncontrollably, my fingers still clawed as if I were hanging on. The stranger with the hockey stick ran up to me, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with concern. "You okay? Did they hurt you?" he asked, crouching down, his voice urgent but kind. I couldn't speak. All I could do was nod weakly, tears streaming down my face, my body trembling too hard to form words. He steadied me with one hand and pointed to the shop across the street. "Come on, let's get you inside. You're safe now." He helped me across the street, keeping one arm steady around my shoulder like I might collapse at any second. I still hadn't found my voice. My legs shook with every step, but I forced myself to move, terrified the van would come back. The shop door creaked open and we slipped inside, the bell above it jingling faintly. The warm light hit me and I almost crumbled right there, the sudden contrast between the street and the safety of the small store too much to process. The man locked the door behind us and pulled the blinds halfway down. "Sit," he said gently, guiding me toward a stool behind the counter. I sat down, clutching my bag against me like it was some kind of shield. He disappeared into a back room and returned with a steaming mug. "It's just hot cocoa," he explained. "Didn't know if you'd want tea or coffee this late." His hand shook slightly as he set it in front of me. I realized then he was scared too, not of me, but of what he'd just seen. "Thank you," I managed to whisper. My throat burned from all the screaming, but I forced the words out. He nodded and leaned against the counter, still holding the hockey stick in his hand like he wasn't ready to put it down. "I heard you the moment you screamed. Took me a second to grab this and run down. I should have been faster. You saved me," I said, my voice cracking. The weight of it hit me then, the van, the hands dragging me, the fists slamming into my face. My whole body folded in on itself and I started sobbing, my face buried in my arms. He didn't touch me, didn't crowd me. He just stood close enough that I felt I wasn't alone. After a few minutes, I pulled in a shaky breath and wiped my face with my sleeve. "I need to call the police." "Already did," he said, pointing to the old landline phone by the register. "They're on their way." The waiting was torture. Every second stretched into an hour, my ears tuned to the faintest sounds outside. Every car passing by made me flinch. Every set of headlights slicing across the window felt like them coming back. The man tried to distract me with small talk, told me his name was Daniel, that he owned the little furniture shop, that he lived upstairs. It felt strange, learning these ordinary details while the adrenaline still ripped through my veins, but it grounded me. "Why were you awake so late?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Couldn't sleep," he said with a half smile. "Was flipping channels when I heard you. Lucky for both of us, I guess." The bell above the door jingled again, and I jumped so hard the mug almost slipped from my hands. But it wasn't the van. Two uniformed officers stepped in, their radios crackling, their faces tight with concern. Daniel explained quickly what he'd seen, pointing out the direction the van had sped off. Then one of them crouched down beside me, speaking in that calm, careful tone they must practice. "Can you tell us exactly what happened?" The words tumbled out faster than I meant them to, every detail, from the sedan creeping behind me, to the map in his hand, to the van door sliding open. My voice shook, but I forced myself to give them everything, even the smallest things. They scribbled notes, nodding, occasionally asking me to repeat something. By the time I finished, I was exhausted, drained in a way I'd never felt before. One of the officers offered to drive me home so I wouldn't have to walk again. I hesitated, glancing at Daniel. "Go," he said softly. "You'll be okay now." I stood, legs still unsteady, and for a moment I wanted to hug him but didn't know if I had the strength. Instead I whispered, Thank you. One more time. He gave me a small nod. Get some rest. And don't blame yourself. People like that, they plan everything to make you feel safe. You were smart to fight back. As the officers led me outside to their car, I glanced back through the shop window. Daniel was standing there in his robe, hockey stick still in hand, watching until I was gone. The back seat of the police car smelled faintly of leather and cleaning spray. I pressed myself against the window, staring out at the blur of streetlights. It should have felt safer, sitting between two officers with radios crackling and the hum of the engine steady. But my body didn't believe it. Every time the headlights of another car washed over us, my heart skipped. I kept imagining that white van reappearing, cutting us off, dragging me out before anyone could stop it. The officer in the passenger seat tried to make conversation. You live far from here? About 10 minutes, I muttered. My voice sounded hollow, like it belonged to someone else. Good. We'll make sure you get in safely. When we pulled up outside my apartment building, the street looked completely ordinary, quiet, still, like nothing had ever happened. I half expected to see the van parked across the road, waiting, but there was nothing. The officers walked me up to the door. One of them offered to check inside, but I shook my head. I just need to be home. They hesitated, then gave me a card with a case number scribbled on it. If you remember anything else, call us. We'll patrol the area tonight. I nodded, thanked them, and stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind me, and I locked it 3 times, sliding the chain across. The silence of the apartment wrapped around me, and only then did I realize how badly I was shaking. I dropped my bag on the floor and sank onto the couch. My hands were still trembling, so I held them tight together. For the first time since it happened, I was alone again, and the weight of that nearly crushed me. Every creak of the building made me flinch. Every shadow in the corner of the room felt like it was waiting. I tried calling my sister, but it went straight to voicemail. I didn't want to wake my parents. They lived 2 states away and couldn't do anything but worry. So instead, I sat there in silence, clutching the card the officer had given me. My mind kept replaying it all. The way the man's voice had sounded too casual, the sudden slam of the van door, the iron grip around my waist. And then, Daniel's voice shouting across the street, cutting through it all. If he hadn't been awake, if he hadn't grabbed that hockey stick. I forced the thought away. When I finally crawled into bed, I left the lamp on. I couldn't bring myself to turn it off. Sleep came in broken fragments, full of images of headlights and hands pulling me backward. I woke up sweating, the sheets tangled around me, my throat raw from imagined screams. The next morning, the bruises were already blooming across my arms, dark fingerprints etched into my skin. My jaw ached where his fist had connected, a sharp reminder every time I moved my face. I stood in front of the mirror, touching the swelling, and felt a surge of anger cut through the fear. I went to the shop later that day, carrying a small box of pastries as some kind of thank you. Daniel opened the door, still looking tired, but his face softened when he saw me. "Hey," he said quietly. "You okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "But I wanted to thank you. If it wasn't for you..." My voice cracked again, and I hated that I couldn't keep it steady. He gestured toward the counter. "Sit. You don't need to thank me. Anyone would have done the same." "No," I said firmly. "Not anyone." We sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee this time. He showed me a small piece of wood he'd carved years ago, shaped like a hockey stick. "Take it," he said. "A reminder you weren't alone last night." I didn't want to cry again, but the kindness broke me. I tucked the little carving into my bag, holding it like a lifeline. That evening, when I got home, I set it on my nightstand. Not as a reminder of fear, but as proof that someone had cared enough to run into the night for me. For the first time since it happened, I slept with the lamp off. The days that followed blurred together in ways I can't fully explain. Some moments felt painfully sharp, like the sting of bruises when I pulled on a sweater, or the jolt in my chest whenever a car slowed near the curb. Other moments passed in a haze, as if my mind was too tired to process them. I went through the motions, woke up, went to work, answered polite questions about the mark on my face with a vague, "I fell." But underneath it all was a steady thrum of unease, a reminder that safety wasn't what I once believed. I avoided walking home for a while. I ordered rides, even for the shortest distances, and spent money I didn't really have just to keep the fear at bay. The idea of another quiet street, another shadow stretching too long, made my stomach twist. I told myself it was temporary, that soon I'd feel normal again, but the truth was, I wasn't sure what normal was anymore. One evening, about a week after it happened, I stopped by Daniel's shop again. He greeted me with the same tired but kind smile, and I felt something in me loosen just being there. His presence reminded me that not all strangers in the night were threats. Some were the reason I was still here. "I can't stop replaying it," I admitted, leaning against the counter. "Every time I close my eyes, I hear the door sliding open again." He nodded slowly. "That's how it works. Your brain tries to protect you by making sure you don't forget. But it'll soften with time." His words didn't erase the fear, but they helped me breathe easier. He didn't tell me to get over it, didn't say I was strong for surviving. He just told the truth. That was what I needed. The police called me once more, asking me to come in and look at photos. They wanted to see if I could identify either of the men. I sat in a sterile room flipping through pages of faces, my heart racing with each one. But none of them looked exactly right. Some were close, similar builds, same tired eyes, but I couldn't be certain. In the end, all I could say was, "I don't know." The detective tried to hide his disappointment, but I saw it anyway. Walking out of the station, I felt heavier than before. There was no closure, no neat ending where the bad guys were caught and locked away. They were still out there, somewhere, maybe watching someone else, maybe circling another street. That thought haunted me more than anything. And yet life had to move forward. I found myself slowly building new habits, keeping my keys in my hand when I walked, glancing behind me more often, telling friends when I'd be home. Little things that seemed paranoid before now felt necessary. One night, as I was locking up my apartment, I glanced at the small wooden hockey stick on my nightstand. It was simple, almost crude in its carving, but it carried weight. It reminded me that even in the darkest moment, someone had chosen to run toward danger instead of away from it. That thought steadied me. Months later, I still carry pieces of that night. I still startle at sudden sounds. I still hesitate when a car slows near me. But I also carry something else, an understanding that survival isn't just about fighting back. It's about remembering the kindness that met me in the middle of chaos. When people ask about the bruise that faded into a faint mark near my jaw, I don't always tell the full story. Sometimes I just say, "A bad night, but I was lucky." Because that's what it feels like. Luck, and the bravery of a man in a bathrobe with a hockey stick. And though I'll never forget the fear of that sliding door opening, I'll also never forget the sound of his voice cutting through it, sharp and certain, pulling me back toward life.